the suggestion that all neurotic suffering comes from being identified, which is to say, having been given an identity, either by the thinking mind or by the social system, which is an externalization of the thinking mind, doesn't make a lot of sense when we first hear it, generally speaking. Or perhaps we could say it doesn't make any sense at all. Probably it doesn't make any sense at all. But that's not a bad thing. Stuff which does make sense straight away, like stuff you could read on the back of a cornflakes packet, and yes, it makes sense straight away. You don't have to spend a lifetime decoding it, is junk, really. It's junk knowledge. Anything that comes so easily, as easy as falling off a log, is junk. Anything that's obtained that easily is junk. If something is obtained through a process of lots of hard work and frustration and all that kind of stuff, then at the end of it, no matter how hard the journey, what's obtained is good. It's got genuine worth to it. It's got depth. In fact, it's only the fact that the journey is difficult that can result in us getting somewhere worthwhile. Easy journeys never, ever, ever get anywhere worthwhile. Easy journeys don't get anywhere. They seem to be getting somewhere in that first flash when, like, here's me reading the back of a cornflakes packet. Maybe it's telling me something useful, and straight away there's a flash. Oh yes, and that's what catches my attention. That's the whole thing about browsing on the internet. There's all this stuff that flashes. It's all this type of knowledge. It's all trash knowledge, junk knowledge. Junk knowledge is easy, so easy, and has often been pointed out, we've kind of lost the ability to stick around in the uncertainty and difficulty to get anything else other than junk at the end of it. And this is often said, and it kind of sounds like the old generation talking about the younger generation, saying, they have to have everything straight away, or movies have to just straight away have to be all about all of the good stuff, such as the car chases and special effects and God knows what. But we can see there's a principle here which is perfectly true. So when it comes to psychology or psychological understanding, in as much as there is such a thing, but we could say that genuine psychological understanding is the same thing as wisdom. It's not a fact-based thing. We can say that that is the most difficult of all. Naturally, it's the most difficult of all. It's at the core of everything. It's the most difficult. It certainly isn't to be obtained from the back of a packet of Weetabix. And it certainly isn't to be obtained by talking to someone who can just tell you something, some kind of formula or some kind of idea that we get straight away because it fits into our pre-existing understanding. Anything with any degree of truth in it never fits into our current understanding. The whole point of anything with any degree of actual truth in it is that we don't like it. It doesn't fit. It offends against our sensibilities. It's not what we want to hear. It's dangerous. The truth is always dangerous. It is the business of the truth to be dangerous, to paraphrase Whitehead, I think it was, who said it is the business of the future to be dangerous. And maybe that's kind of the same thing as well. I don't know. Could be the same thing. So even though to say that it is being given an identity that is the cause of all of our mental neurotic suffering doesn't necessarily make a hell of a lot of sense straight away. This is no reason for disregarding it. Everything we have to work at, if we're interested in working at it. It's not like there's some kind of fascistic kind of need that we have to work at psychological understanding. Of course we don't. It's only if we are genuinely motivated to do so, and that means we don't have to, but we want to. So if we really want to understand something, then we have to work at it. And if we don't, then that's fine. It's okay. We can go on and do something else. And we will go on and do something else. There's no worry about that. We most certainly will just go on and do something else, and then something else after that, whatever. So the reason that being given an identity is the cause of neurotic suffering is because being given an identity is it's kind of like being killed. It's kind of like being murdered in a way. We're being murdered because the reality of who we are is being replaced with an identity, and that identity doesn't allow. An identity is like a big, strong, bullying voice. It doesn't allow for other, quieter, wiser voices. Bullies are never wise, and they don't like to hear anyone coming along and saying something that might actually have some real sense to it. So they shut them down. We listen to the bully because they've got a big, big voice. So that's the whole thing with an identity. That's the whole thing with the positive reality, the reality that is created by thought. It's all very obvious, like a brick in the head obvious. So we think it's the ultimate reality because it's so obvious. But who says that the actual reality has to be the obvious brick in the face type reality? I mean, that's something that we're just assuming there. Could be the other way around. Could be that the obvious is not real, and that if we just get a bit curious and investigate further, we might find out something more interesting than the obvious brick in the face type reality, which is made out of definite statements, dogmas. Anything that the thinking mind touches, it kind of in a way destroys, it pins it down. So we could say that reality itself is mobile, and the system of thought is static. Every time thought touches something, it freezes it, it pins it down. And no one's going to argue with this, really, because the whole action of thought is to pin things down. That's what thought is. Thought puts things in categories to identify stuff, judges stuff, evaluates stuff. And when it does this, it pins it down. That's what thinking means. It means pinning down. Instead of thinking, we can just talk about pinning down. So, of course, thought will have this property of destroying everything it touches, in the sense that the intrinsic nature of all phenomena is fleeting, transient movement. There's no place where things are coming from, and there's no place they're going. It's just the movement, and there's no things anyway. So, because if we talk about things, then that's a fixed thing. So really, when we incautiously use a thinking mind, we're running around committing an act of violence the whole time. Our waking life is just one big act of violence against the nature of things, against reality. We're heedless in our violence, running around completely heedless because we think that's the way to go. And we think if we're not violent, this reflects badly on us. We think we're kind of some kind of dummy then, or some kind of wimp. We have to pin things down and be assertive about things. Otherwise, what account? We have no account. It's kind of like we have no existence otherwise, so we think. And in that kind of black and white existence, is true. We don't have any blunt, concrete existence if we don't pin things down. But that's not a bad thing. Having this kind of brick in the face, concrete existence is not a great thing. It's not a great thing because it's the doorway to all neurotic suffering. And once we've had a good taste of neurotic suffering, we're not going to want to go through that doorway. We're not going to say it's a good thing. But that happens further down the line. So first we identify, say, I am this, I am such and such a person, I am such and such an identity. And then after that, then we repent at leisure, so to speak, because there's nowhere to go from that. The concrete identity has nowhere to go except itself, and it isn't a real thing. It's just a category of thought. So it has no journeys upon which it can take. All it can ever do is slowly decay, which is a good thing. Because unless it decays, cracks up and loses its apparent integrity, we're never going to be free to carry on with the journey that is really ours, which is kind of just another way of saying that we can never start to be part of the movement, which is reality. Again, we're always going to be clinging to unreal forms, as the Buddhists say, and as every wisdom tradition would say. So it's as well to be aware of this deadening, violent nature of thought. It's not to say that thought isn't useful, because when we're dealing with a certain realm of things, it works perfectly. That's what it's designed for. But when it's applied to the deeper reality, it turns everything into its own categories. And that's, as I said, is the beginning of our problems. So a good way of looking at this and making it kind of making more sense of it in a realistic day-to-day way is to think of what happens in families. In a family, we're known. Everyone knows who we are. Carlos Castaneda says, your father always knows who you are. Of course he does. Doesn't matter what you go, what you do, or anything. He always knows who you are. And when Carlos Castaneda says that, he doesn't mean that in a good, reassuring way. He kind of means that's a deadly thing, really, because through knowing who someone is, we're restricting them absolutely to whatever category, unexamined category we have in our mind. So this brings us back to the idea that giving someone an identity in this way, knowing who they are, is abuse. It's abuse because if I know who you are, I am pinning you down so that you are nothing more than my own concept, my own static picture. But you aren't. You're much incalculably more than that. And so for me to not only insist that you are my mental picture of you, but actually, via the mechanics of the situation, actually make you believe that as well, because such is the power of thought, that is abuse. I'm turning you into something which is far, far less. I'm degrading you. Not just in the privacy of my own thoughts, I actually am, because when I'm interacting with you, I'm interacting with you as this degraded version of yourself, this extraordinarily truncated or limited version of you. And due to the hypnosis of thought. I become who you think I am. I am whatever you say I am, your man says. What's his face? And that's got a certain ring to it. I am whatever you say I am. But it's horrific. Imagine that you go around the place, you bump into someone, you are what he says you are. Is he going to say you're something good? He can't, because everything the mind says you are is just a dead category. And anyway, people have this kind of, on the whole, more than 50% of people have a kind of malign quality in the sense that they're unhappy and they're projecting that unhappiness on other people. Maybe not all the time, but there's a tendency to do that. And so there is this quality to our designation of other people that we put them down. It might seem wrong to say that, but people put other people down, even when they don't know they're doing it, maybe especially when they don't know they're doing it. The ego construct bolsters itself by putting other people down. Not everyone down. There's certain people who will put up on a pedestal and everyone else will put down. That's human nature. That's what we do. That's what society is. It's a systematized way of putting certain people on pedestals and putting everyone else down. But the weird thing about that is that even the people we put on pedestals, we're putting them down. We're limiting them because the pedestals are rubbish, because they're just created out of categories of thought. The greatest respect we could ever show anyone is not to pin them down with our thoughts and actually notice them as they actually are, be aware of their nature as their independent existence, independent of our thoughts, independent of our projections or conceptions. It's a difficult thing to do, because every time we interact with someone or meet someone, they trigger stuff on our part, associations, reactions, defense mechanisms. They trigger all the old stuff, all the old machinery, and that old machinery, when it's triggered, paints a picture of them. So we're always dealing with the past in relationships. No matter how much we might fall for the other person and imagine that we wish them nothing but good, straight away what happens is there's this mutual triggering. And so the person who we have fallen in love with or that we're in a relationship with very, very quickly becomes a screen for us to project our old stuff on. So we're doing this kind of interaction with our old stuff the whole time. We're just using them as a way of projecting the stuff on. So we can carry on with this private game of wrangling and kind of trying in this perfectly futile way to sort out problems that can never be sorted out, or to work things out that can never be worked out. It's as if we're stuck in the past and we can't let it go, so that because we can't let it go, we're painting everything in the past and we're recycling ourselves the whole time, recycling our own private, totally futile drama, because it's got nothing to do with anything. So that's the type of violence we do to people unless we make the effort in our lives to listen for a change and not project. So projecting is the positive stuff. Everything's positive. Projecting goals, projecting ideas, projecting plans. Enacting, all of that is enacting the ego construct on all cylinders. But if we're actually to show any kind of respect or interest, we could say, for what's around us and the people that's around us, we've got to operate out of some other kind of basis, out of a negative basis, even though a negative basis isn't a basis as such, but it's kind of like there is a modality of interacting from the absence of who we are conventionally thought to be, or the absence of the ego construct, who I conventionally think myself to be. We could take a break from it and actually just pay attention. And then there's no violence involved. But of course that involves taking our sense of ourselves, our thought moderated sense of ourselves, down off the pedestal we have it on. And we don't want to do that. We're afraid to do that because we don't know what might happen then, what might be the case then. So the enemy, if we can call it the enemy, or the adversary, is thought and its tendency to pin everything down. And when thought does pin everything down, then we're stuck in this particular world, which is just me, as I understand myself through thought, and my projections, which are thoughts. And nothing ever happens in that little cocoon of me and my projections. It's totally, totally futile. I'm just vibrating. I'm just rattling around in there forever. In a sad way. It's a sad business. And at first I don't realize that it's a sad business, and I think great possibilities are there in store for me. That's how we start off. It's like a game of Monopoly. We collect the $200 and we're off to do all the stuff, to buy all the things. But unlike the game of Monopoly, we never do get to win. We never do get to anything. We do just always go to prison, no matter what. But we launch into it with gusto, with vigor. And that's what neurotic suffering is. It's the gradual increase in perceived futility and meaninglessness. Start off, we don't have much of a perception of the inherent futility and meaninglessness of our existence. Far from it. We're all bright and shiny, and with the bright shiny ego heading off into the world, the great adventure. And then neurotic suffering, when it sets in, it tarnishes the shiny ego construct, and slowly our life becomes more mired in a sense of futility, frustration, and meaninglessness, or we could say alienation, which comes to the same thing. And that gradually increases. Now in psychiatry we might say, okay, that's a bad thing because the brain chemicals are doing bad stuff. Maybe we can fix it in some way. But from the perspective that we're looking at, or looking from, all of that perception is the perception of the truth. It doesn't feel good. It's horrific. We never even guessed there could be anything as appalling as that. But that doesn't mean it isn't true. It just means that it's extraordinarily difficult to take on board. Okay, thanks for watching.